Alrighty. All right, everybody. I'm Crystal. I'm from CRM Bookkeeping. I help small businesses, and I'm located in Sandwich, and I'm excited to get started. So let me, my sharing screen is disabled, guys. Pam or Trisha? Hello?
Try now. Can you do it now?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Can everybody see properly this time? It looks good, Pam?
Okay.
Perfect. All right. So last time we talked about customers and sales and how to do invoices and sales receipts and stuff like that. So we're going to move on to vendors and employees this time. If we're able to, we're going to start talking about what this other column is. So you get to vendors the same way you do some of the customers. As I mentioned last time, sometimes you can do these on the left-hand dashboard side, other times they're the new button. So when you click this new button under vendors, we're able to talk about expenses, checks, bills, pay bills, purchase orders, vendor credits, credit card credits, and then printing checks. We can get into what each one of these means on the next few screens. And then employees, this is basically your payroll center if you use QuickBooks Online Payroll. And then this other column again is bank deposits, transfers, journal entries, statements, some inventory adjustments, and pay down credit cards. And hopefully we'll get to those as well today. So to get started here, how to input an expense. So you would go to that new button, you go into that vendor column, seeing that first one was expenses. And this brings up, it looks pretty similar to the invoices that you did and the sales receipts that you do on the customer side. But this one is in regards to just expenses. You can do this to a certain, if you're not using vendor bills, you can put those bills in as you pay them as expenses, or this would be stuff that goes through as debit card transactions or credit card transactions, such as your automobile services, fuel, utilities, stuff like that. Up here, you put your payee, so that would be your vendor name. Here would be your account, if it's your checking account or your credit card account that it's being deposited into. The payment date that you're paying it, how you're paying it. A lot of times this is just check, but you can also do credit card as this says in MasterCard. Again, you have tags, so you could use a tag in order to just keep track of certain items. Like if you wanted to do utilities or telephone, sometimes they come in handy of just being able to search them all at once. You also have categories down here. So this is where you would put anything that's on your chart of accounts of your utilities, a telephone bill in this example. You can write anything you want in the description, or you can have it auto-populate. There is an amount here that you put in of how much you paid, the date you did, and anything like that. On the next couple of screens, we'll show you what billable and taxable and how to relate it back to the customer is, but you are able to do that. So if in an instance you were a construction company or you were taking over utilities for for a brand new build for the customer, but you can bill that customer back when the time comes at the end of the project, middle of the project, whatnot. And then down here you have the same options as before. You can write down a memo that you need them to see, account numbers that don't show up automatically, or you can attach the bill just for your references and to be able to say like, oh, why was it $225 where I normally pay $100? If you have an attachment to that, you can locate it here. Same thing as before. You can also make this reoccurring. If this was the same amount of monthly payments all the time, it was always on the same date each month, you go in there and then you have your save and close and your save and new. And here we are about the billable expenses that I just went through. It's The same thing, so you can mark this off as billable. I used in the previous one a construction company paying telephone expenses for temporary utility drops and whatnot. And so you can use that for anything. You could use that for office supplies. If you're printing something to somebody, if you're a graphic designer and you're printing business cards, you can use a line for that. Construction, landscaping, you can just do miscellaneous supplies. All that type of stuff is what you would bill back to a customer depending on what your business is. And you can make sure you do this billable and then make sure you put the customer name in here. So therefore, when you go to make the invoice, it will show up as a billable expense that you would like to add to that. And then this is just, normally this is already pre-programmed depending on how your business is. But if you, for some reason, had a taxable item that normally your stuff is not taxed, you can double click this. And a little check mark will show up. This is how you went. So once you put in that billable expenses, this is how you, when you go into your customer side to make an invoice for that particular customer, this screen up over here shows up. And it asks you if you would like to add to the invoice. You can do this every single time you do an invoice. You can do this once a quarter and have a bunch of them all at the same time. That is just an internal procedure for your company on what you would do. So again, you would go to new, you go to invoice, you choose your customer, you make sure all the information is right with the invoice date, the due date. You can then, if you have something else to put in here, this is where you would put in your normal stuff, and then you can hit add to add the billable expense. And you will get an invoice that shows this. So this line here is your billable expense that you've added. In this instance, it's taxable. And this thing shows that it's linked to another transaction in QuickBooks. So if you could actually click on that and it would show up that, hey, it's a billable expense, and you can see what it was. And then, as I mentioned in the previous screen, this would be your regular custom design work to show, and save and close, save and new, you can customize it how you want, like we discussed last week. This one, when we put these slides together, I noticed we're a little bit out of order, so please bear with me, but I'm going to show you how to input a check ready for printing. Then we're going to go on to bills, and then we'll go back to a little bit more detail about how to enter the checks and what to do with them and how to pay all the bills all at once. So this is a check. So this would just be physical check that you have written out from the bank to a particular vendor, to a customer, to whoever you did. So you want to make sure that there is a difference between checks and expenses. As I mentioned before, expenses are stuff that goes through your checking account, but does not have a physical check that attaches to it. So you would go to new, you would go to check to just create one wherever it's going, whichever account you choose. Your payment dates, again, these are all pretty much the same, depend any kind of transactions you do in QuickBooks Online. This would be right here is important. If you are just recording a check, you would put the check number in there, and you do not have to do this print later. You can just continue on to down here, enter your information, and hit save and close. If this is a check that you are writing out and that you're going to send to the customer, or you're going to print from QuickBooks, you would want to make sure you print later. So when you're at that print screen, then that's when all those check numbers show up. But again, this is the same categories. You could choose whatever it is it happens to be. Meals and entertainment, this one happens to be lunch for crew, was $85. And again, you also have the options to make it billable or to go to the customer. Most of them will not. So this is the bill. These would be used by companies that are putting in their vendor bills and paying them at a later date. So this would be something that if you had supplies, your utility bill, like your Comcast bill, sometimes they come through, you don't want to pay them right away, but you want to record them to make sure you know how much is out there and how much is owed. That's how you would when you would use a bill. Again, same information up here. Make sure the only thing that would be different is your due date. You want to make sure that those are the same. So sometimes you can set up your terms for certain vendors to be net 30, net 15. Sometimes they're just randomly due on the 9th. So we want to make sure that those due dates are correct. If there is a bill number, you would put it in here. That makes your life easier when you go back to try to see what was paid or what wasn't paid. If your vendor comes back and says, hey, this bill was unpaid, it makes your life easier to be like, no, it looks at this, and then you're able to see the corresponding check. Same thing here, categories, your description, you can add it. It can be auto-filled. Anything else, your amount. You can hit save, save and close, or save and schedule payment. If you schedule a payment, it is not necessarily scheduled through your bank. It is just scheduled through QuickBooks. Sometimes people get a little confused with that. The only time that does end up true is if you had like a bill.com app or something like similar that was linked up to your QuickBooks Online, then you would be able to schedule them. Bill.com would send the check when you deemed appropriate.
I have a question, Crystal.
Yep.
It says, do you have to import your customer information separately beforehand for the invoice or as you're creating the invoice? And how does QuickBooks retain customer profile info?
So for customers and vendors, you can enter the information as you're going. So you could put P&G, there's a little drop down. If it doesn't show up when you're typing it, it has on the top, it will say like, do you want to add a add customer, and you just add them. You enter this mailing address. One of the downfalls that they haven't really fixed yet is if you enter the information here, it does not save on the vendor side. So if you went back into your vendor or even your customer screens, you went to P&G and E, it will just say P&G and E. It does not have all those details of whatever your terms were and whatnot. And what was the second half of that question, Pam?
Let's see. How does QuickBooks retain customer profile info? You just sort of said that it doesn't here, but if you do it on the front end as a vendor under vendors, then it will, correct?
Correct. Okay. So I answered them both just in one.
Yep.
Okay.
So doing it here would be helpful if it's like a one-time person you're never going to use again. If you don't care about saving that info, you just need it for this vendor. But if it's an ongoing one, you should do it in the vendors list, right?
Yeah. All right. So a good procedure would be to enter all your bills all at once. So as you have them, just enter them all. So therefore it will come up and you're able to pay them all on one screen instead of individually going in and paying each bill. So when you go to new, you go to pay bills, you come up with this screen and it shows what's open, when it's due, how much is due, if there are happens to be any credits that go towards that particular invoice, and it gives you the option to choose how much you want to pay. When you click it, at first, it will automatically show, hey, this column here will show your open balance. If you, for some reason, needed to pay a different balance, that there wasn't a credit out, or it was a vendor bill that you are paying 50% now to get us to work started and 50% at completion, you can just override the amount. You can put $100, you can put $140, whatever you need to do here. But then it will show here what's your total for the payments for each one, and it's going to show your total amount. It will also show down here what your checking account balance is, how much your payments are that you've checked off, here, and then what your new checking account balance will be. This is just to be able to help you out, knowing you clearly don't want to pay more than what you have in your checking account. So that helps you prevent doing that. You can also start, I missed up here, but this is where your starting check number would be. So you want to make sure you put it in up here as well. And these would be this list occurs from anything you clicked on pay later when you were inputting the check, or any bills that you actually have open from a vendor perspective. From the vendor side, all your bills that are open, you will be able to check them here. And again, you'll get this save and close, save and print if you want to print it. If you're actually physically printing the check, you can just save them and print them later. After the bill is paid, if you went back into pay bills, it will just show what is still out there that you haven't paid. You just start with a new screen. So you will see that this insurance agency is right here on this one, and it is no longer on this screen. And so I think that's all we were trying to show here, is just basically if there's anything that's past the due date, it will show, and then it does take it away from the screen. So back to checks. When you are first setting up your checks and you go into print checks, it will have a little print setup here. So you will either need to click on that print setup, or it will bring the screen up for you. This is going to take a little bit of playing for you in order to get it set up. Sometimes it's really quick and it lines up perfectly on your checks. Other times you have to kind of play up and down and see how it goes. But you're going to print your sample of your check. You can do this with a blank piece of paper, so therefore you're not wasting any checks. And then usually I have a blank piece of paper, a regular check, and then I just put it up to a light to make sure that they all kind of come in line the way you want it to. But you're going to check a voucher or your standard checks, whichever one. This actually tells you to load that blank piece of paper in your printer. It will preview and print sample, and then you're able to hold it up to that light, like I said, and you want to make sure that they line up. If it does not line up, which like I said, you have a 50-50 shot of dealing with it. Sometimes it lines up perfectly, sometimes it doesn't. You can go no, continue to set up, and we don't have that screen. So it will give you a little screen that shows horizontal line and a vertical line, and it will give you different numbers to go up and down, and you just keep playing with it until you're finished and that it's all set up the way you need it to be. Like I said, don't be afraid to print it multiple times, and this might take a little bit of time to set up. But once it's set up, then you don't have to do it again, unless some reason something changes, or you change a new printer, or you change new checks. But this is usually a little bit time consuming to set up, but then you're done, and you're done. You don't have to deal with it anymore.
Okay, I have a question. Sean, does this answer your question about adding check printing and what it entails and the pros and cons, or do you want to get into a little more detail on that? Okay, Crystal, the question was, how do we set it up within QuickBooks? Oh, the QuickBooks checks, are you meaning? Because QuickBooks can send the checks for you if you wanted to set that up for them, right, Crystal?
Yeah.
So that's a separate process. And if you want to set that up, do you do that through the apps?
I honestly don't use the one through QuickBooks, but yes, some people will use, a lot of people are using bill.com instead of QuickBooks. And again, it is an app. You set it up through there, you follow the directions, and then they send it off. You choose what needs to be paid, then you're down here. It's really down here. When you schedule it, it will connect to bill.com, and then bill.com can send it for you.
Okay. So just like if you logged onto your bank and they mailed it for you.
Yes, same process. The point in those third-party apps and doing it is just so you don't have to, it's just a protection from your bank account and give in those third-party apps. They're just kind of keeping, it's coming from bill.com, it's coming from QuickBooks Online, and it's not connected directly to your bank account.
Okay. Rihanna has another question. Go ahead, Rihanna.
Sorry, I didn't know how to type this efficiently. So you can either send all the checks electronically, is what I'm understanding, to, let's say you get an employee or two, you can send it electronically through this third-party bill.com. Otherwise, you'd have to purchase, make sure your printer is the right printer to print checks and buy checks to print. Like if you've never done that before, that's a whole learning curve for like the correct printer and actually check paper.
You would have to buy the checks. So you would have to use, order them through Deluxe, you can order them QuickBooks, you can order them through your bank, there's 1,000 opportunities out there. So yes, you would have to order the checks. As long as you have a regular printer, you're fine. So it doesn't have to be any kind of particular printer. It just has to be, you're just going to have to play with it because it's depending on your settings of your printer. QuickBooks Online might line up perfectly. You might have to adjust it, -5 degrees, +5 degrees, and this is how you would play with it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions in regards to checks, or we're good?
Looks like we're good.
Okay. All right. So printing checks, this is actually where I was starting to say earlier about the print later. If you have things on print later, you get a list. It is similar to the one a couple screens ago, where you just have a print, a list of checks that you wanted printing. You again would put your check number. You would make sure you pick the right checking account. You want to make sure you have the right starting checking account, and you can click or unclick whichever checks you wanted on this list. You can preview and print it just to make sure it will show up with a screen that just shows a voucher or your standard one, just to make sure that the addresses are on there, the amount of the check that is printed, that you want to print is correct, etc. If you had any problems with it lining up properly again, you could go right in here to the print setup and it would show you this previous screen and you could follow the directions if necessary. But as I said before, is once you do that the first time and you spend a couple minutes making sure everything's lined up, you normally don't ever have to touch it again. Now we move on to credit card expenses. This is where up at the top you would do new vendors and then pay down, pay credit card or credit card credit, sorry. This is extremely similar to a regular expense. The only thing that's different is this is just going to your credit card account. So you would treat it the same way in regards to your payee. When it says over here, normally in the previous one where we had bills and vendor expenses, you had checking, you would just click this over to your proper credit card. You would have the payment date, and this would be the date of the transaction, not the date that you're paying the credit card that you would want here. Normally there's not any reference numbers, but if you did pay a particular invoice to a vendor, you could put that here. Again with the tags, and then here's your category, the same things as previously, your categories, your lunch, your description, that is either auto-filled or you typed in the amount. You can make these as many lines as you want. So if there was one transaction and it happened to be $100, you could do meals and entertainment for $50, $25. You could do utilities for $49.75, and that way it would equal 100. You can, like I said, you can add as many lines as you need. Most transactions are 1 or 2 lines. And again, you would save and close, save and new to move on to the next screen. All right, so this is just showing you all those transactions that we entered. So you went through, you entered some checks in there, you entered some credit card, expenses, you entered bills for vendors. If you needed to see just a list of what you did on a particular day or a particular time, you can go in and go under expenses. And then when you click on it, you will end up with this little dashboard that will say expenses or vendors. And then you end up with the screen, or just hit expenses and you end up with the screen. So expenses here, and it is just as simple as it looks. It's just a list of your vendors and what was entered here, what it was, who it was to, the category that you put it in. You can change this if you needed to. For some reason, if you realize that, Bob's Burger Joint was not meals and entertainment for some reason, you can clear it. You can change it right here, hit enter, and it will save it as well. Any memo that you had written on there, and then the amounts here. If you do have any checks, you do have the option, or even a bill, you have the options to print the check if it is still being in the pay later category. You can view the check, you can edit it, you can even delete it on this drop downs here. You can also enter, again, where I said things are multiple places, you could also go to expenses and add new transactions if necessary. Pam, did you?
Got two new questions. The first is, could you explain what a credit card credit is? How is this different than importing your credit card transactions?
The inputting your credit card transaction is automating this system. So the credit card transaction, when you automate them, when it's downloading into your credit card register, it is automatically doing the credit card expenses and a credit card credit. So it is recording as a debit or credit any payments, any credit card, any credits that you refund, that type of thing into your register, or any charges that would be an expense.
You just often have to pick the category, right?
Correct.
And it does memorize them to a certain extent. Yes.
You want to be careful, especially if you have somewhere, if a certain vendor has, sometimes it's meals and entertainment and sometimes it's something else. You want to just be careful, because QuickBooks Online remembers what the last one was and will automatically put that in. So you just want to be careful.
Yes, and if you didn't input your checks, sometimes it does that with all the checks that come in, what the last check was versus breaking it out.
Yes, good point.
We have another question from Emily. She has her hand raised.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Sorry, I wasn't entirely sure how to word this. So I own a boutique, and so we had gone through the categories when we had bought inventory and put them in as inventory. And then, we met with our accountant, and then he was like, your cost of inventory are super high. So I'm wondering, when does that inventory turn into cost of goods sold? Like, is there a third-party app that I can connect? Like, I use Square as my platform. Will that be able to put it, like, change that inventory into cost of goods sold?
So, all right. So your inventory, it is in as a product or a service in your QuickBooks Online?
Well, so you can buy, yes, we put it in as a category as inventory. And so, like, everything that we had bought wholesale, and then, but inventory at the end of the year is, just what you have left in stock. So I'm just confused, I guess. Is there a way for me to put that as, and turn it into cost of goods sold?
Yeah, because do you not have Square set up to your QuickBooks Online? This may end up being a parking lot question, just to kind of.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine.
I definitely think it might need to get into a little bit more detail with you, because depending on how you set it up is different directions on how it, and how you sell it gives you different directions on what you need to do.
Okay, that's absolutely fine.
So if you want, can you send Pam an email and she can get in touch with me, and then I can give you a couple different options and a lot more detail of how that switches over. But normally if you didn't have a third-party app and they were connected, you would have the inventory items in QuickBooks as a product and service, and then you would go and invoice your customer. And once they're paid, and in those processes, it turn, in the bills that you get in.
Sorry, Crystal, my computer cut out, but thank you so much for your help. I appreciate it.
No problem. Pam, we good now?
We are.
All right. All right. So you have all this list here with your different types. You're able to see them. You're able to change them if you necessary. You can, like I said, you can go over here. You can view something, and it will pop up the screen for what it's supposed to be. You can also filter it. So if you were looking for just Bob's Burger Joint and the transactions that have been in the last month, in the last year, etc., you can do that as well. So up on the top, there is a filter button. Once you click it, the drop-down shows up with what you're looking for. So you can choose a bill, a check, an expense, a credit card transaction here, and all those different options will pop up on the drop-down. Your status, overdue, if it was in the past, if it's just, what's open, that's where that would be. You can choose those custom date range. You can choose the regular drop-downs that show up as well. The last year, the last month, the last week, yesterday, etc. will all show up, as well as any custom dates that you happen to choose. And this comes in handy when you're like, oh, I know a couple months ago we went there, but I know it was approximately $50, but I don't know what it is. You can kind of just narrow it down to whatever that couple months would be. Again, you can search for a particular payee if necessary. In this instance, it would be Bob's Burger Joint, but you can search just by amount or just by time or one single one of these versus all of them. And then you hit apply and it shows up a list. We don't have that screen. So then it will start, once you click all of these and you choose what you need to, you hit apply, and then it will show a list here that you can kind of see in the background of these particular items that was to a certain customer or whatever criteria you chose to do. And then from that perspective, you can say, oh, this wasn't legal fees the way that I thought it was, and you can go and change it. You can just view it, whatever you need to do, what you needed to do once you found it. All right, so this was going back to something Pam and I were talking about earlier. So when the person that was asking about addresses and in the checks or in the bills, if you could change them, yes, the answer was yes, you can change them. It just does not keep them permanently. So this is where you would find that. So this is the vendor center we were talking about. It's just the next tab over under expenses. It has the same cool, little status bar that shows you what you've paid, how many purchase orders are out there, what kind of open bills, etc. And it gives you the list of all your vendors that you have. So you can go into a particular vendor to add that address, add their phone number, whatever it is that you believe is necessary for you. You can also create a bill, create an expense, write a check, create purchase orders, make a customer inactive. If it was somebody that you did business with for a short amount of time, or it just didn't work out, or you had a one-time project with them, you can make it inactive so it won't show up and have a really long list. And this is also kind of a good quick view section for you to have, just a good quick view of what somebody's phone number is if necessary. You can go to this gear icon and make this, have their column specialized to something that you need as well.
We have another question.
Yes.
Emily?
I liked all these questions.
Go ahead, Emily. Emily, your hand is raised. Did you still have a question?
Oh, no, sorry. I don't know how it got re-raised.
Oh, okay. No problem.
All right.
All right, I fixed it. We're good.
Okay. All right. So viewing individual vendor payments, you would go in to that same screen before. You can click on the customer. It will show up all the details, or when you go in over here to view, and it will show your customer, any information you happen to have on them. So if you had their address, it would show up here. Any kind of specific notes of Mahoney's Mugs is also known as blah, blah, blah. Send their, second address is, you would kind of have those in their notes section. And then the important part, the kind of importance of this is just being able to see Mahoney's Mugs, how much have you sent to them? All at, once, has there been one transaction? Has there been multiple transactions? Do you want to filter it in regards to, again, hey, I know I spent some money with them. It was approximately $50 and 2 months ago. You'll be able to see that here. And then you'll also be able to make any changes if necessary, again, with this drop down. And over here, you can view it. You can make a copy of it. Sometimes you have transactions where, every couple months is the same type of one. You can copy. Most people use this as a delete or a void transactions. Void is just where you want it to be exactly what it is. You want it to stay on the record, and you don't want it to be deleted completely. And these are the vendor details that I was talking about that you would have seen up here with any kind of notes, that if you had notes down here, they would show up here. You can have any kind of files that you want in the vendor section. You usually don't have attachments, but sometimes if you wanted to have their logo for some reason, or there was a client agreement, a vendor agreement that you had with them, you could store that here, as well as all the other basic information, their terms, their billing address, etc. You would change anything. You can change them by just clicking edit, and it will bring up a screen and allow you to type in the information that you need. This little thing here just lets you expand and collapse your list of vendors. It is in any list that QuickBooks has for you. So it could be a customer list, a vendor list, an employee list that you would click here, and it just makes it so this goes away, it gets collapsed, this screen is bigger. I like to have it open because you can look at the vendors all at once, and you can kind of see like, okay, I'm done with Mahoney's Mugs, so now I need to go look at something from Robertson's Associates and see what there is, and you can just easily click it or search for it here.
I have a question. You know,
Okay.
where you had the attachments back there, would that be a good place for someone to save a W-9 if they have a 1099 contractor? Or is there a better place to save that?
You could. You definitely want to put the information into QuickBooks. I believe that there's a screen once we start getting into payroll, it will show you where to put that. But you would want to put that in the vendor information. It's kind of a practice of, I think it's just a best practice for your business and where you want to keep them. As some people like them to be in a more secure location and have all W-9s all at once, so they can just kind of look at them all in a folder. Other places are perfectly fine with exactly what you suggested of throwing it up there and just knowing you have it, and just make sure that that system just stays the same for every vendor.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So this screen is just showing the status bar here. So, it shows you what your purchase orders is, how many bills are open, what's been paid, how many is overdue. If you click on one of those three, if you click on one of them, it takes your vendor list and just shrinks it down into what is appropriate for that category. So in this instance, this is just showing your overdue bills, who they're from, what they're overdue, how much they're there, and then gives you the option of if you want to make a payment, you need to create an expense or create a bill. And that just gives you a drop down to give you different opportunities. You wouldn't really, I think from this perspective, in regards to what the overdue bill is, you wouldn't really be creating a new, unless you needed to create a new bill for that same customer. You'd really be using this to just show that like the bill has been paid online, or the maids make a payment so you can write a check and pay the bill. Alrighty. So basically that was it for vendors. We've gone through this whole list of knowing what an expense was, what the checks are, the bills, how to apply each one of these. And then so now we're going to go on to an employees section. This really is only in regards to having QuickBooks Online Payroll, one of the versions of it. You can keep an employee list here, but beyond that, you need the QuickBooks Payroll service, which is an extra payroll subscription. So you can go into logging employee time. You can do it multiple ways. You either do it by a weekly timesheet, or you can do it by a certain timed activity per day or per time. If you have a lot of jobs, multiple jobs in a day, you can do the weekly timesheet. That makes it easier because it's all there. This would be just a one-time option for somebody. So you would want to make sure you go into new, you can enter time activity. And this just tells you what you need to do in order to make sure you process payroll and account for time properly. You want the date, you want the employee name. If this is going, if this is going to go back to customers, or they were working on a particular customer, you want to make sure you enter the customer name in here. That allows it to be billable to that customer and necessary, like this one is this for a landscaping company. You're going to go back at the end of the month and you're going to bill the customer for the time on the job. And then the service in this instance, they were gardening for the landscaping company. She was there for 4 hours, and she's allowed, we are going to bill that back to the customer. So we want to make sure we check this. If it was a job that was, say for this landscaping company, it was something that you were just paying, charging them $5,000 and it wasn't going to be billed back on an hourly basis, you want to make sure this is unchecked. You enter your start and end times by whatever it is that they happen to do. If there happens to be a break in here, you can do for, half an hour, 15 minutes. It does go by hour and the colon and the minute. Service, any descriptions that you happen to need. If there was something, in what they did more than just the weekly gardening service, they were pruning roses or hydrangeas or any of that stuff, or putting out hay bales, winterizing irrigation, any of that type of special stuff you could also add in here on top of your weekly garden services. And then it just shows you a total of what you entered, and you just want to make sure it's correct. You want to make sure that she really does get, 4 hours at $4 an hour. She's pretty cheap, only charged you $16. And then you hit save and new if you needed to log in more time for a different employee or not, or you can just hit save and close to move on to whatever else you need to do. And then this is a weekly timesheet. And this is where I said that it is easier to do if you have somebody that, 2 hours here, 2 hours at a different customer type of deal, or you just happen to have the whole week and you just want to enter it all at once. You don't have to go into and do individual time activities. You can just do the whole timesheet. And again, it's kind of similar, except for the whole week. You would just do the employee name, the dates, the particular week. This is set up by however you set up your payroll system. So if it is biweekly, you would have biweekly dates to choose from. And it shows here the employee name again, the service that you did, any kind of note, the customer name again, sorry, the service, any kind of notes you happen to have, if it's billable or not, and then you choose to enter their times for whichever dates that they happen to work for that job. So if this one happened to be 4.5 hours here, and they did 4.5 hours Tuesday, you could just do them all in the same line. And as this example shows, it gives you that same information of how many hours total did they work, what was the dollar amount that you're going to be paying them. And that also shows down here too, is these show for this employee, how many jobs, how many hours as well. This also comes in handy down here as well, is if you have the same employee working on the same jobs on a weekly basis, you can copy their last time sheet and it just shows that information. And then you could either just override it if there happens to be one different thing, or keep it the same. This also kind of comes in handy as if you have multiple employees on the same jobs for the same week, you can do copy last time sheet, just change the customer name, the employee name, and then move on, save a new, and you're good to go.
Right. Can you pause for a second? I have a couple other questions from people
Absolutely.
regarding payroll. That's a big topic for a lot of people. So one of them is, do you recommend using a third-party payroll company?
It depends on, yes, I do, but it's a level of what you're doing with third-party payroll. If it's going to be QuickBooks payroll or if it's going to be a local payroll company, depends on the amount of time that you're willing to put into this, how you're tracking things, and whatnot. And some of these, every payroll, you have an opportunity to, you take care of the taxes, or they do. If you're not going to do the payroll yourself, you should definitely have it. So whoever does it, even if it's QuickBooks payroll, they should take care of the taxes for you, so you don't have to worry about it.
Okay. So QuickBooks payroll can act as your third-party payroll company, but you probably have to do more of the work using QuickBooks payroll, or the same amount of work, but you're doing it in QuickBooks.
Yes, it's the same amount of work, because no matter what company you do, if you're using QuickBooks Online or you're using a local payroll company, you're still going to have to track your employee. You're going to have a tracking system for your employees' total hours, what jobs they're doing and whatnot. So I think the work is the same. It's just a matter of, do you want to pick up a phone? What is your business? Do you want to pick up a phone call and just be like, okay, Emily worked 8.5 hours and Diego worked 10, or do you have to build these back to your customer and how you're tracking them?
Okay. And then how do you enter your payroll if you're not using QuickBooks payroll?
That ends up being that you look at the reports that you get from your payroll company, and then you would be making journal entries to record the proper liabilities in the right amount, and then the checks when they're paid.
Okay, that's what I had in questions for right now. So does anybody have any builds on those two answers? Or further questions on that? Okay, we can keep going. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So adding time for an employee's time to an invoice is the same system that you would for a billable expense or anything you chose as billable earlier in these classes. So you would create your customer invoice, you enter your customer name, all this stuff populates. You have your invoice date, your due date that you would choose. And then you have this thing just automatically shows up. So it just shows you that there are things that were marked billable for this particular customer and gives you the option to add them to the invoice if you wanted. So you just hit add, it shows up. screen and then with the total, and it will show the little linky thing, and then you can continue to invoice your customer for whatever else you need, or just bill them for the time itself. You're good to go. Save and send it, save and close it, however you choose to send it to your customer. So viewing employee information. This would just be the same. It's basically the same as your vendor list that we talked about earlier, except for it's your employees. So it would show, your employee name, their phone number, their email address. If you click this edit, it gives you the opportunity of what their social security number is, what their hourly rate is, their mailing address, etc. You can run reports from here or make employees, inactive. So if you have an employee that's just gone or they're gone for a season and you don't want to look at a long list, you can make them inactive and then just reactivate them when they come back, or if they're gone forever, you just keep them inactive. You can run a report. It will show anything that your information that you need for those employees. For some reason, this word is very hard for me to say. I'm sorry, guys. The employee list. So you can just run and it will show a list of all your employees, all their phone numbers, all their rates of pay, all when they're if you're looking at individual ones, it will show their paychecks that you've written out to them and when and how much type of information. You can also add an employee here. You can just add a new employee up at the top, and you just follow the directions and put all the proper information, and you're good to go. And then this would be for a particular customer, for a particular employee, that you would, when you ran the report, if you chose for a certain time, you could do it by customer and by a specific time. And it will just show that this employee spent, 4.5 hours at Diego's place. She spent 4 3/4 hours at Mark's and 5 hours here doing the fruit veggie place. And she was doing different gardening, lighting, shrub trimming, poured concrete here, and she just had a weekly garden service. This helps you just knowing where your people are and what they were doing and how much time they spent doing certain things, because you end up thinking, oh, tree and shrub trimming is not that big of a deal and not time consuming or whatnot, and then you find out like, hey, I ran this and Emily has spent actually a lot more time doing this than I thought. And it just kind of helps you internally as a business make the right decisions, make sure you're charging your customers properly, making sure you're timing out your day for your employees and that type of thing. And sometimes you just need to know, because the customer will look back and then they'll just ask you a question and say, hey, how many hours did they spend? And you just need to know that. So that's where these employee time reports come into play. You can do, again, I didn't point out in the beginning, but it's the same as reporting as before. You can choose your custom dates. You can choose last year, this year, last month. There's a whole long line of them for particular time periods that you want. And you can group them however you want. You can group them by all employees and just show what they are. You can group it by customer. Those are things you can pick. And then up here, you can also customize that, for some reason you didn't want this billable column or you didn't need this product and service column. If you go into customize, it gives you the options to pick and choose columns or add them as appropriate to what your business is looking for and what kind of reporting you need. 1099 contractors, you're able to run the reports here. You're able to prepare them. You're able to see what they are. You're able to add them as a contractor. If you can also add them as a vendor in the vendor screen. You just want to make sure that it's about 3/4 of the way down on the right. There's a 1099 section, so it's a little checkbox in the vendors. If it says you want to track for 1099, you want to say yes, and you want to put their social security number or their EIN number in there. just to make your life easier come this time of year, you know, where they all have to be out by the end of January. It's easier to just write these in as you're starting them, and then you're just able to run the reports in order to issue the 1099s at the end of January. You can see, and then this just kind of gives you just the same information, add contractor, see which ones are active. You can search here if you had a long list and you were looking for something in particular, you can search it up here and it will show just the one that you're looking for, or maybe the two if you just do certain letters.
I got a question specifically on the 1099s. Is this updated to have 1099 NECs?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question I have, and is long, but basically, if you have employees, is it possible for them to be able to log their time here?
If you're using QuickBooks Time app, yes.
Okay.
That is the, I don't really use QuickBooks Online too much, but now that you're making me think about it, that there is possibly that you can give your, do you know the answer to this, Pam? Because most people that I deal with, they use QuickBooks Time and they, or some kind of third-party app, and it imports in. But now that I'm thinking about it, it might be possible for you to put your email address in and let them have an employee-only login.
Yeah, the only thing I know you can, I just don't know what level of QuickBooks Online you need to have in order to make that happen. On some of the lower levels, you might be, it might count them as your employee, as people that have access to it, even if it's restricted to just putting their time in. That's the part I'm unsure about.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I wonder.
But they could use the QuickBooks Time app, and then the people are just doing it on their phone and it's uploading it here for them.
Correct. And that's the way, I mean, that's the way, as I started, that's the way most people do it, that they have QuickBooks Time that enters all those timesheets. And each employee can do their own, and then somebody in your office, yourself, your payroll manager, your office manager, whoever that company happens to be, can approve them.
Okay. Can you use it for employee commissions? So like if you have a sales rep and you pay them a commission based on their sales, can you use QuickBooks? Do you mean QuickBooks Time or QuickBooks in general, Sean? Oh. In general.
So you usually just rate checks for the commissions.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm asking is the ad sales reps at the newspaper, they don't get they're on payroll, but they also get commission, and then they don't get the commission until the customer has paid us. So some customers pay up front, and then that's a big commission one time. But a lot of the customers just pay, say, once a month whenever I bill them. And I'm just curious if there's a way to sort of have a report that says, yes, all these customers owe this ad rep, or we owe this ad rep this amount of money because these customers have paid this month. Does that make sense? I'm just wondering if that's an easier way than the way we're doing it now in like Excel spreadsheets.
Well, you can run, you can customize reports in order by customer sales in order to determine their commission.
So I could have like yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to break it down between the different ad sales reps.
So you can make it so, I think you actually didn't you send me an email this morning right before this started?
Yes.
I'll respond back to this with your stuff in particular in regards to this as well. But overall, you can do sales reports. So when you put in your customer invoices, you can attach them to a sales rep, and then you run a report that
Okay.
by sales for that particular time, and that's how you base their commissions off of.
Okay.
That's usually the general basic procedure.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much. Thank
No
you.
problem. Anything else, Pam?
Nope, that's it for now.
Okay. All right, so then your other tab under payroll is your workman's comp. This is just through QuickBooks. In their QuickBooks just meets up, makes deals with the Hartford or any other insurance companies to try to get you the best quote and to try to pair you up. It's just that. So you can have a local insurance agent that gets your workman's comp. Usually you can have a better deal because you already have your general liability and et cetera with your insurance company. But for some reason, if you just only needed workman's comp and you were getting some high prices locally, QuickBooks Online could help you try to meet up with that, get you some quotes, and then they can set it up that it is either billed at the end of the year or it just gets billed weekly with your actual payroll. And that's kind of it here. It does link up with your actual payroll, so your quotes become with that, so you're paying, you don't end up with a major workman's comp at the end of the year either way.
Does that help you? Can you, if you connect it through that way, does that help with the annual report on that?
Yes, if it's set up that you're getting paid, if you're paying the workman's comp per payroll versus, on a yearly basis, it can help at the end of the year when you get a workman's comp audit. You shouldn't have some surprise bill at the end of the year because it's been doing with your actual payroll. All right, so moving on to this other column, we're going to hopefully get bank deposits, transfers, journal entries, some statements, some inventory adjustments, and pay down credit card.
Yeah, we're doing good. It's 10 o'clock, so.
Okay. So your bank deposit. This is where last week when I mentioned undeposited funds, this is kind of where, so if you had multiple payments from multiple customers, but you were depositing it as one in the bank account, you would want to make sure that you receive those payments under each customer under undeposited funds versus your checking account. So this is where you would find them. Anything that went as undeposited funds, it shows up here, and you can click which ones you wanted to put into that one bank deposit that you made. So you're going to choose your checking account here. It gives you a nice little thing to show you what your balance is before you deposit. And then you change your date, tags as general if there's something that you particularly wanted to kind of track, but you definitely don't have to. You click 1, 2, 20, whichever ones that are appropriate here for your total to match your bank deposit that you're making. You would choose here, it will show how you recorded it. So if this said check, this could have said credit card. You can say nothing like the screen says. And also the same thing here is that when you were receiving that payment from the previous screen, if you put any check numbers or a memo in here, you would see that information all here. You can add deposits to the same deposit. So you had these 2 checks that you put in an undeposited fund, but then you have an insurance rebate check that's on top of it for say $50. You can go and put received from, you would choose your insurance company, you would choose an account and put it in here as insurance. You can write insurance refund. If it was, I'm assuming most of the time those are checks, so we're just going to put a check with the reference number and we can put $50 in here. And what it does, it will just add to this total that's up here to make it match what you have on your bank, your handwritten bank deposit slip. Once you're finished, you would hit save and close, save and new, however you chose to do it. If you had 1 or 2 more, you could do that all at once. Some people choose to print their bank deposit, just kind of for your records. It will just show that on this date, it basically prints a little report for the screen. It just says checking account, this date, what was included in that deposit. So it would have pool cars, it would have Freeman, and then it would have that insurance company's name. And it would just show you, since everything's electronic, you already have the bank deposit for your handwritten one. You really don't have to print anything, but you have the option. You can also make the same things reoccurring. Those are really more if you had a monthly subscription. You know, anybody that has some Stripe, some Square stuff that, you know, the same person pays you $20 a month every single month for their monthly subscription. You could make that deposit reoccurring, but again, those are really the only times that you would use that. So the next thing is transfers. Transfers are exactly what it says, is that you're transferring money from one account to another account. So you would just choose your savings account that you were taking money from, you're putting it into your checking account, the amount of money that you're putting. You can, this is just an internal note for something that you want, you know, it was just a cover or transfer for payroll. And in these balances here are for these six particular accounts. So in your savings account, you have $800. In your checking account, you have $1,201. You have the date that you're doing the transfer. And again, this is here in case you had any strange thing that occurred and you wanted to be able to look at a picture of it. But normally you don't, just because it's a transfer from one account to the other. And again, save and new, save and close. You could make me recurring if this was something for payroll that you did all the time on a weekly basis. You could make this reoccurring, so then you don't have to remember to go into QuickBooks and change it all every week. So journal entries. These, normally you wouldn't, if you're entering things as expenses and as payment properly, you wouldn't really be dealing with journal entries very often. You would just be dealing with them for making any kind of corrections in a previous year that you couldn't change the actual transaction for. Sometimes if you have a POS system or some kind of third-party system that is inputting information into QuickBooks, you will see those as journal entries. But beyond that, these are usually saved for your accounting, end of year transfers, depreciation, and all of that stuff. You would just make a general journal entry in order to change things. But for this example, we're just going to change it because we misapplied a commission fee, and it should have been, part of that should have been a bank charge. So we're going to go in, new journal entry. We're going to put our date. We're going to have a journal entry number. A lot of places do 1, 2, 3, 4, or however that happen to be. I like having your initials just as a clue. So therefore, if you have multiple people in QuickBooks that are making changes, you can have your initials on there, one, you know, CRM. So therefore, you know that Crystal was the one that changed it, or yourself was the one that changed it. But those are just internal tracking. So it's just easy to see. But you would just make changes here. You would need to know, you know, credit versus debit, what it does and increases it or decreases it, if it's an asset or a liability, and that starts getting into a lot of, you know, heavy accounting that we won't go here. But if you knew you needed to decrease the commissions and fees, you would do $50 as a credit because fees of $100, but 50 should have been bank charges. So you're going to take away 50, and then you're going to add 50 to the bank charges. You would hit save and, you know, save and close, save and new, whichever is appropriate. Once you hit save and close, this is basically what it is doing. So it is taking your commissions and fees. You had $100 that was recorded under there, where it should have been 50. So your journal entry took that $50 away and put it into bank charges. Creating customer statements. you would want to, this is just moving on and allowing you to create a statement for your customers that you've billed. Show them what's been open, and instead of going in and individually, going into Amy's Bird Sanctuary, creating a statement, you're able to just do this all at once by going into new, other, and then statements, and it will bring up this screen. You can choose what kind of statement that you want it to show, your statement date. A lot of the times this is either the first of the month or the end of the month, but it can be any date in between. You want to show, what do you want to show on there? Do you want them to show paid invoices? Do you just want to show the open invoices, etc.? You can choose a start date. You can have it all year. You can have it just last month, depending on what you choose. And then you can choose here, who do you want to send it to? Do you want to send it to everybody that happens to be on this list that you have email addresses to? Do you want to take away a couple people, just Jalopies and John Milton, that there's a problem with their invoice and you don't want to annoy them by sending them another statement? You can just easily unclick them. And so that way they don't get a copy. This also shows here of anybody that would have a missing email address and you're not ready to send the statements, you would find them over here. But back to this of the statements that are available, you can unclick whoever you want. You can choose to keep them all. It all just depends on who you're trying to send them to and who you're not. You can print preview them here. You can just see that the statements are the right format that you want, go into the right customer, etc. And then once everything is approved and good to go, you can just hit save and send, and it will send you, it will send a list to each individual customer, so they'll get a statement. And then just another nifty little thing here that it likes to show you the total. So you just kind of have, instead of having to go in and add all these up, it just shows you that total here.
Yeah, I have a question from a prior slide. It says, I have a $75 account receivable on a report from 2019. Can I use a journal entry to clear that?
Yes. Yes, that would be the appropriate response to that. You would just want to make sure that it goes to the appropriate account. So if you did happen to get the money, you want to make sure it goes to sales. If it's something that you're never going to get the money for, you want to make sure it's recorded as bad debt, etc.
And that would be in the current year since those books are closed for 2019, correct?
Exactly. You never want to do anything on previous years after your taxes have been done. So if there's something right now where we're talking January for 2021, you definitely want to make any of those changes now and have them all squared away, but we definitely don't want to be doing anything for 2020, 2016, any of those things. You want to make them in the current year, their previous, if they're in some kind of previous year like that.
Thank you.
All righty. So the next thing is making a credit card payment. This is a different way. If you have your credit card going to a credit card register in QuickBooks, it's already going to record this in that register for you because it's automatically downloading from your credit card account. But this is also just a way to make a payment. You just go to other and then pay down credit card, and you just need to choose who you did. So you would just choose which credit card you wanted to pay down and which payee is optional. But I would always like to change it. So, I always like to kind of have that vendor name in there just for trackability purposes. So you would just put Bank of America, Capital One, etc. How much did you pay? The date you made the payment. Which checking account did it come from, or a bank account that it came from. So you would do checking, in this case, savings. Did you make it with a check, or did you just do a transfer? If you did do a check, you want to make sure you put the check number. It also gives you the opportunity to print the check later if you were doing such a thing. But you don't have to have that printed, or you could. Again, you have the opportunity for a memo. you know, if this was an extra payment for a certain reason or monthly payment, you know, you can put anything you want in there, or you can leave it blank. And you have an attachment section. Some people like to put their credit cards in your attachment section, so therefore you have your credit card statement. If it's already scanned, you can attach it here, so then you can see you paid just the minimum, you paid the whole thing off. You can see that the balance matched, or you could see that, like, hey, this credit card was a little bit higher than normal, so therefore I just paid part of it now and I paid the other part 2 weeks from now. And then you hit save, and then you can do save and no, save and close like normal. This is these registers that I was talking about, and I believe Pam was talking about a little earlier in regards to things come in. Once you set them up, you set up your credit card, it talks to the actual credit card company, you know, Chase, Bank of America, whoever you happen to be using, and it also is connecting to your bank account. You just want to be careful when you see this dashboard and you're accepting things down here. You don't want to just automatically hit add, or, you know, just because you don't want all these to be uncategorized income or expenses. You want them to be particular sales items, income items, etc. You also have the opportunity to, if there's something in QuickBooks already and it matches, the QuickBooks will see that and it will just say, hey, we found this deposit, it matched. Do you want to just match it? Most of the time the answer is yes, but you just want to be careful that if you have the same amounts that go out all the time, if you know you have the same $1,000 invoices, you know, for 10 different customers, you just want to make sure it matches up to the same one. And that you would see that with this multiple matches found. When you expand this, it will give you the dates and the transactions that it is showing for PM here, and then you can choose which one is appropriate, and then you'll have the opportunity to hit add instead of view. One of the things you also just want to see is just up here. You know, you kind of want to make sure, ultimately, in a perfect world, your bank balance and your QuickBooks balance are going to match. You know, everything's going to be recorded, everything's going to match perfectly. You know that there's no problems and you're good to go. That's not, none of us live in a perfect world, so that's never going to happen. Some people do this. They'll check their bank balances and make things match every few days. Other people will wait a few months before they check them and try to do it. So you want to just make sure that you have your own internal system that helps you keep track of these things and be able to go in and accept or match them. Because the more transactions you have, the more your reporting can be just slightly off because they're not accepted. Your account balances, you're making decisions based off of information, you know, things that just may not be real. And then this little number here shows you how many transactions that are waiting to be approved. So on this one was B25, this one is 1, this one happens to be 7. It also gives the opportunity to tell you how long ago that your bank account and QuickBooks Online were able to talk to each other. So this one here was moments ago. Sometimes it says a couple hours, sometimes it's a couple days. So if you want to, if it does say a couple days, you do want to just go in here and update it to make sure things are matching.
I add something here because I've worked with a couple of people that had an error at some point and it didn't update and they had to go in there and manually update it. And they didn't look at this register regularly. So they had like 6 months it hadn't been working right. They could only download 3 months of information from their bank. So then they had to go back and manually enter 3 months worth of data. So whatever your system is for, you know, inputting this data, make sure that it's less than your bank's maximum downloads so that you don't end up with having to do it all manually.
Yes, that's a good point, because I was actually going to say is make sure, my next thing was actually going to be, if you happen to see something that was more than a couple days old, you might want to make sure that there is an update that it is updated. And then you would go in here on this drop down where it says linked account, you can actually hit edit and you can make sure that your password has changed, is that information is correct. Because sometimes you go in, something happens on your bank account and you're like, oh, that's kind of sketchy. I'm going to just go change my password, and you forget what you're going to change it to, go back into QuickBooks and change it. So you want to make sure that that's done and they're linked up. And like Pam said, nobody wants to go in and check 6 months worth of expenses and make sure things are done. You kind of want to have that as up to date as possible. And then from here, the only other thing I want to just point out is that if there were, so when you download things from bank accounts, occasionally certain things will come in from your bank account that you've already reconciled those previous months. So in this example here, is say we were only dealing with December and November and December, these October ones came in. You already know they're matched, but they're not giving you opportunities to match. You've also double checked them in your check register. You want to make sure you can click these, and then you can, when you click them, there's an activity that says batch actions. You can actually exclude them. So they'll come here, so then they don't keep wanting to be a duplicate entry. This next screen is your apps. So your apps, this is where you would find any Square, any Bill.com, QuickBooks Time, all those different apps that you're using. This is where you would find them if they're already connected, the list. And then this is also the opportunity for you to go find them. If there was something that you wanted to link up to QuickBooks Online. Down here, there's an option that says explore. I think it just says explore apps, and you would just click on it. And then you can choose by the app name. You can choose to do it by like back office or CRM or payment, depending on what kind of app you're looking for. Rules. Rules just help you save time. They're just, you get the same transactions that happen all the time and you know what to do with them. So you can just say, hey, every time there's Comcast bill, you want to name it internet and utility, internet under utilities, and I can auto add it for you. You can do the same thing for reoccurring invoices and stuff that will show up here. You can set new rules of this customer. These are the particular dates. These are the conditions that I want to send, and these are the ways that they go. So they're just kind of helpful in regards to exactly that, is you just save time. And when you're on this screen here, sometimes it will show up too, that if you have the same things that are showing up all the time, you will get a pop-up that says, would you like to auto add this? Would you like to make a new rule? And you can answer accordingly. Tags. These are the opportunities of, if you were using tags that we mentioned before, to just track certain things. There's a couple examples here of aerobics classes, yoga classes, fitness instructor payroll. If you use them, it would show them all down here. So you would just kind of have a list of what your wording was that you used, how you want to do it, and which transactions are linked to it. It would show that you had 50 transactions, and you would just click on it to be able to show that hyperlink. Make sure, the only thing I say is if you're using tags, make sure you use the same words all the time. So don't do utility versus utilities. Just make sure you're very particular on what you're using, because it will only show up with those letters in those words. And then receipts. This comes in handy for people just because you're able to scan them. You can scan them for your email. You can upload them to your computer. So you can have Google Drive, you can have OneDrive. They're all their stores spared. You can even have decks, but that's also under the apps. So you just take a picture of your receipts. It gets uploaded. It can get changed, and then in your banking account transactions, if they're already uploaded, QuickBooks will notice, hey, you already have this particular receipt for MPG fuel for $50. Would you like to match it? And then you can just kind of have them matched. So it makes it easier just for you to record it, for you to track how much you're doing and seeing like, hey, this MPG says, you know, meals and entertainment, shouldn't it be fuel? You can kind of see the receipt and see that you did record it properly. And you just have that list here as you're doing it. It shows the receipts that you did scan, the dates that they were scanned, what they matched to, the amount, if you chose them under a category, and if you need to do anything with them of, you know, that drop down list of delete, void, create a new one, etc. And as I mentioned before, you can just upload them from your computer. You can do Google Drive. You can set up an email forwarding receipt here. And if there's anything that's in process, that's where this shows. And if it's already been done and matched, you'd find it under the reviewed column.
The other place that one's helpful is if the receipts go to the store, but somebody's doing the bookkeeping at a different location, the store can upload them for you potentially, and then you don't have to get the actual piece of paper.
Yes.
And I think this is a good place to break, right?
I was just going to ask you that same question.
Yes.
It's going to be like,
right
we're
on
pretty close to
schedule.
10:30.
And next time we're going to work on the, you know, doing some of these topics with a live version as opposed to with the slides. So we'll be able to dig into them deeper or not as deep, depending upon what people's needs are. Before we go, does anybody have any questions today? No. Well, the good news is almost everything that I have put on the parking lot have been addressed so far. So if you have other topics or questions that come up over the next week before we meet again on the 25th, feel free to email them to me and I can put them on the list. If there are specific questions that we need Crystal's help with, I will forward them to her and we can get back to you with the best fit for your question. So thank you everybody for participating, and thank you, Crystal, for a great presentation.
No problem. I look
I'll see
forward to
everybody.
seeing everybody next week.
Thank you.